The New York City Center for Media Education is a learning hub. We are here to make education accessible. CME provides a wide variety of training: podcasting, filmmaking, television and virtual production, as well as post-production. We have everything from how to edit your video to how to make a television show. We designed and created a space where it was meant to be a hands-on experience. We try to maintain a space that's affordable, that's accessible, and not one that restricts folks based on their skill level, their income. The reason that CME exists is because folks will come back to us and say, I got a job at insert TV station here, or I started my own production company and I quit my full-time job and this is what I now do as a career. I think what makes CME unique and different from most other learning institutions is that once you finish doing the work, we welcome you into our community and being a place where folks can create content, distribute their content. Creatives who are entering the CME community can expect unfiltered support. They can expect folks who are rooting for them, who are passionate about the work that they're doing, and who will be their biggest fan. Hi, welcome to the 2024 Winter Media Summit. My name is Tiffany Blunt, Director at MNN's New York City Center for Media Education. We hope you are in good health and prepared for a few exciting days of free media events. I'm here to introduce you to the keynote speaker. But before I do that, I first want to tell you a little bit about MNN. MNN is a media learning, production, and distribution hub that promotes creative expression, independent voices, and community engagement. We have 2 facilities in New York City featuring television studios, podcast studios, and editing stations. Want to learn more about how to become involved at MNN? Attend one of our upcoming orientations at either our El Barrio Firehouse facility or our Hudson Yards studio. Looking for information about educational resources, job opportunities, or upcoming CME classes? Make sure you sign up for our weekly newsletter, The Real. Now, I personally want to share with you all what's on tap for us in 2024. We are excited to announce CME Storytellers, our first ever fellowship program designed to amplify underrepresented voices. Our fellowship programs center diverse storytellers and provide access to equipment, mentorship, and media training. Audio Storytellers is the first in our series of fellowships and features a serial podcasting development program slated to begin in April. Now, applications are open until March 8th at 11:59 p.m., so make sure you get your application in today. Now, I am pleased to introduce the keynote speaker for the 2024 Winter Media Summit. Zackary Grady is a writer and director whose productions span film, theater, and fiction podcasting. He created, wrote, and directed the audio series Gay Pride and Prejudice for Spotify and Gimlet Media, which premiered at the 2022 Tribeca Festival and was nominated for 2 Ambie Awards, including Podcast of the Year. His short film Island Queen, which stars Jesse Tyler Ferguson and Rachel Dratch, played a series of festivals including SFFilm, NewFest, and Inside Out. His work in theater has been produced off-Broadway, regionally, and internationally, including his upcoming play God Save the Queer, which premiered at the 2022 Williamstown Theater Festival. Please join me in welcoming Zackary Grady.
me, oh, I didn't know podcasts had writers. And you can't blame people for having that reaction because the truth is we live in a time where audio series are pretty new. I mean, even the nomenclature around them, what we call them is debated. We call them podcast, we call them scripted fiction, we call them audio series. Um, and I think that that's a really exciting thing. It means that we, the people who make them, the people making audio series right now, are the ones that get to define what they are because there's really no rules. There's no one else to point to before us. And so today, I want to share with you what I believe an audio series is, how I go about making them in my work, and hopefully together we can expand the potential of what an audio story or an audio series can be. Uh, so I think it's important to start off with how I found my way into audio, because it's a nice reminder of my main philosophy, which is you should always just do things that you love. I went to school for theater here in New York, and around the time that I graduated, I went to, of all things, a silent disco. And this silent disco, I would say it changed my life. It changed my career. And before you start saying, "Oh, that's so sad. He's so basic that a silent disco changed his life," I assure you, I'm old enough that when I graduated school, no one had heard of a silent disco. They weren't even called that. Much like audio series don't have a set name right now, we weren't calling them silent discos then. It was just a bunch of friends with their iPods and headphones dancing on a campus. And what's so interesting is at the time I was studying theater and I was very serious about that. And I was writing in a very serious way. But then I experienced this incredibly fun thing that, I mean, I would describe as euphoric at the time. I was like, I've never been in a place where audio could be so exciting. And so I thought, I want to make these. I want to make this for my friends. And so I did. I started mixing audio and adding narration, and I made these a few different events. I made these audio silent discos, and I invited my friends. And what was so interesting is they had the same reaction that I had. They lost their minds, and I started to realize, oh, I wonder if I can make this for not my friends, if I can turn this like really unique, fun thing where we're listening to audio together and put it in a theater. And so I tried it, and I started a show here in New York at a place called Ars Nova, and it snowballed from that. It was this immersive experience where everyone in the audience wore headphones and the story came at them and the experience came at them through audio. And what was so interesting is that started getting a lot of attention. But at the time, I was divided. I had my writing, my playwriting, my screenwriting, and that was very serious. And then this was this fun thing that was getting a lot of attention. And so I let the fun thing get the attention, but I sort of put the writing to the side. And then I went on this 5-year journey where these audio headphone shows went all over the place. I took it to different cities in the US. I even got to work on a production in China, and I lived in Beijing, China for 3 months. And I just was following what I loved and what I liked to do. And I think that's a really important lesson. Um, but what I also realized was, as fun as it was, there was a whole half of me that wasn't being used, and that was the serious writer side. So I decided to combine the two. I took a play that I had written called Gay Pride and Prejudice, and I adapted it into an audio series, a 10-part scripted audio series where I was going to have actors read all the parts and it was fully going to be audio. And that then snowballed. It got set up at Spotify Studios with Gimlet Media. We premiered at the Tribeca Festival. It was nominated for Podcast of the Year. It was all things that I couldn't have imagined on the outset. And I think what is, if you take nothing from this talk, take one thing, and that's to emphasize, I really think that you should just make things that you love. Don't take it too seriously. Don't try to make something to win an award or whatnot. Just I went to a silent disco and I thought it was the coolest thing, and that is why I now make audio because I followed that. I loved it and I kept doing it. And now today, I have as much fun making the work that I make because I followed that. And so let's dive into discussing how you go about making an audio series. Just to reiterate, to me, an audio series is an episodic story that's entirely in audio. There's no visuals. Mine are typically 10 parts. They're about a half hour each episode. My first one, Gay Pride and Prejudice, is out now. I've since then worked on 3 others. I've written 3 other 10-episode seasons of shows. And what's interesting to bring up is none of those are out yet. And that's because it brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is this myth in audio, this myth in podcasting, that they're really quick to make. And of course, you can make them quickly, but I think it's important to discuss how much time actually does go into making something solid. I remember I was on a pitch one time with a producer and they said, oh, we make these and we can do it start to finish in just a few months. And my first thought was, I don't want to work with you. But my second thought was to look at how I do them. And if it's 10 episodes, that means, and each one's a half hour, that roughly translates to about 30 pages an episode. So we're talking a 300-page script. I mean, that's a book. You wouldn't expect somebody to write a novel in a few months. On average, these things take about a year to write. And that's from pitching the idea to getting actors in a studio to record. And I'm not going to be prescriptive about the length of time, but I think it's important to think about not getting into audio series because you want to make something quick. Get into audio series because you love audio, because it excites you, and then just let it take how long it's going to take. And if you find a way to make one in a few months, please share with me because I'm trying to speed up my process. It is, it's slow, but it's worth it. On the topic of writing, saying it takes a year, let's get into how you write for audio. Again, it's really exciting because it's new. Yes, the radio play has been around for a while, and audio series were not invented this year, but it's not like film where there's this history of screenplays that you can study or playwriting that you can study. We're really inventing how we go about doing it. So how do you put something on the page that's going to represent something we only hear? It will look like a screenplay. I use Final Draft. There are many other screenwriting softwares. Many of them are free. You can get them online. Just find something that is going to format like a screenplay. It's very helpful to producers and to actors when you're working with them. The difference is your stage directions, your descriptions are going to describe sound. And the first thing I think you should do to study this, since there isn't a great library of audio story scripts, is to think of films where the audio is inherently a part of the story. Like if you just sort of think for a second, like, can you think of a movie where the sound design, you can't imagine the movie without that sound? And if you think of that movie, if it's one that you've seen, go online, try to find the script. A lot of scripts are just for free online. And if you're lucky, try to find the production draft, not a transcription of the movie. Try to find the actual script that the crew and the actors and the director would have used on set. And look at how that writer communicated sound in the film. That is going to start getting your head into a space where you are going to develop the language to actually put down on the page something we're going to hear. And the first major tool that I use, I would almost go as far to say it's a rule, but I don't believe in rules. And if there are rules, I believe you should always break them. But this is the closest thing I have to a rule, which is if you can't hear it, don't write it. And I mean this literally. It's so easy for a listener to get confused in audio. And the last thing that you want to have happen is for somebody to stop listening because they're confused or get frustrated because they have to rewind or sort of say like, what's happening? I read a lot of scripts for audio series that describe things that we can't hear, that we can only see. And I understand that the only model that exists is screenplays and is TV scripts and theater scripts. But if you write in that way, where you're describing the way a person looks or what they're doing physically, you're really setting yourself up to make a confusing piece in the end. Focus on clarity, focus on what you can hear only, and just describe what you can hear. Like, don't say she walked through a door, say she sighs and a door creaks open. It's a subtle difference, but it gets you into a mindset to get more creative about what the actual product is going to be at the end of the process. Um, I'm going to share with you a page. This feels a little vulnerable, but I'm going to share with you a page from my script for Gay Pride and Prejudice. As any writer knows, it's always scary to put your writing up on the screen. This is a scene that was particularly difficult, I would say, because something had to happen in the story, and we had to think of a way to do it in audio. In the scene, the character is picking up their friend at a house. It's raining outside. The character texts their friend to say they're here. They don't respond. So the main character, his name's Bennett, gets out of the car, walks up to the house, but he slips and falls in the mud and gets mud all over his pants. And then he knocks on the door. And that's a very physical, visual thing. And so let's look at the scene and how I went about doing it. So a car, if you can see this on your screen, read along. If not, I'll just try to read it out to you. So it says a car brakes to a stop and idles, and then windshield wipers squeak in the rain, and Bennett sighs. And then there's the sound of someone typing a text. And he says to himself as he texts, "James, hello, I'm outside." And then the text gets sent. And then he says to himself, "Come on, James." And he lets out another sigh. So we understand what's going on. It's raining. He's in a car. He's frustrated. He's waiting for his friend. And then a car door opens to a torrential downpour. The car door slams shut as feet quickly splash in puddles. Bennett says, "Oh," and then there's a loud thud and a splash. And he says, "Oh my God, no." And then he says a profanity, which I've blocked out because we're very professional here today, but I encourage using swears in your scripts because it's how people really talk. And then his shoes squish like they're filled with something thick, which I could have just said like his shoes are filled with mud, but I think it's important to really try to think about how it's going to sound. And there's a knock on a door, a moment in the rain, a second knock, and the door squeaks open. And I think what you see there is it's all just sounds. There's another way I could have written that where I described like what the rain looked like and what his shirt looked like and where the mud got on his pants, but we're not going to hear any of that. So just make sure it looks on the page like what we're going to actually hear. And I have that sample for you to play. I have that like little what we just read. I want you to hear what it sounded like in the final product. So we can go ahead and play that up next.
James, hello? I'm outside. Ugh. Come on, James. Oh! Oh my God. My f***ing pants! I'm gonna kill James. Okay. Okay. Oh my God. James, where are you? Oh,
oh my God.
Hi, Carolina.
Okay. So yeah, you see like how that is confusing. That can be really confusing. And that came from before that was a scene where he was driving and talking on the phone. The next scene, you hear the voice of Carolina. Those two scenes make so much sense because it's just people talking. When the thing that where it got confusing was that little transition scene in between the car driving and the next thing. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. I think what is important to think about is always think audio first. If you're thinking audio first, it's really going to help everyone involved in the process. Push yourself to write a script that this is what I always say. Push yourself to write a script that can't be made into a film. Meaning, like if you tried to film that scene that I just showed, it wouldn't. A film director would be like, I don't know what to do. Hold on, I think the slides disappeared, so I'm just going to try to problem solve and figure that out. Maybe that worked, what I just did. Yes, it did. Okay, great. Hold on. This is live. Welcome, technology. Okay. So what I was saying there was a goal I always have when I'm writing an audio script is if I handed it to a filmmaker, that scene that we just heard and the script that we read, a filmmaker would be like, "What am I looking at? I don't know what to film. Like, where's the camera? What's the POV? Like, what was it? What time of day? All that stuff. That's not important in audio. There's other things that are incredibly important in audio. I feel successful when my script looks like something a filmmaker would be annoyed at because we're not making a film, we're making an audio series. So push yourself to do that. Write something that's inherently audio. Ask yourself at every step of the way, is this audio first? We heard texting in that. Another thing we used a lot in that show was phone calls. Like, if a scene's boring, put them in different rooms and make it a phone call. Have one person be in the room with us and have the other person be on the phone. They sound differently. It's suddenly interesting. Trust me, like it takes a boring scene and just amps it up a little. And then start thinking this way. Like, think of places you can put scenes that are just inherently more interesting. I have a show that I'm working on right now where I put them at a drive-through window at a Starbucks, just because like that is a soundscape that is really fun to hear. Intercoms in public spaces, pilots on an airplane, and any sort of thing. I would say anything that's naturally audio in the real world is going to be dynamic and interesting in an audio series. You can even take this a step further and have what's known as an audio device. And what this means is you're sort of wrapping your whole story, your whole series, however long the thing is you're making, you're wrapping it in an audio device. Everything about the story is going to come through something that's entirely audio driven. So we heard Gay Pride and Prejudice. That's the audio device we used in that was the phone, which sounds very simple, but it was what every scene had to do with. There was always a phone in the scene. And it's a rom-com. It's a modern rom-com. And that's how we fall in love today. That's how we date. That's how we fall out of love. It's how we communicate with our friends. It's real. And I think I was so excited to explore dating through the soundscape of phones in an audio series, and it really, really works. We opened every episode with him calling his 3 friends. That repetition became something we got really used to. We heard everyone's voicemails. We heard him leaving a voicemail. Also in that sample, hopefully you heard a great way to do texting, because texting is visual, but if you just have somebody sort of talk to themselves and read the text and then put the little clicky sounds underneath the talking, your character can text in an audio format, a visual thing. Other devices I've used, so I'm working on 2 of the shows I'm writing right now have audio devices. You also don't need one of these, so don't worry about this if it's not going to work for your show. But I have one series right now where the main character has a meditation app that he engages with in every show, every episode. And we all, even if you've never used a meditation app, you understand what it is. It's a way that somebody works with their mental health or finds a way to calm down. We all know about the Calm app, and even if you've never used it, you understand its function. We found it's a way for the character to express his emotional state, to say what he's doing, to update us in the story. We open every episode with it. I have another show where the main character is a radio journalist. So we hear a part of his episode every show. We hear competing radio shows. They're all fighting for the same story. So we sort of hear the story through the way they're reporting on it. It's a great way to dump exposition without it sounding boring, especially on phone calls. Voicemails, it's a great way for you to tell your audience, like, this is where I am, where are you? And that's hard to get across otherwise, but it's a trick to just throw facts to your audience. One thing on audio device is I would suggest don't just arbitrarily pick something. Of course you can. If you're writing something about aliens and like you want to use found cassette tapes for your audio device, great. But I would suggest you try to like link those in some way. I always say, think of your protagonist's needs and the thematic journey of the story, and can that tell you what the audio device is? So for Bennett in Gay Pride and Prejudice, his friend group was fracturing and they were all coupling off and dating. So, and they were moving across the country. So that's where phones come in handy. As your friends move across the country, you stay in touch on the phone. He had to learn how to like let people grow. He had to learn how to be in a relationship. All of this, that all linked to the phone. And if you have an audio device, it will make your audio series make sense in audio, if that makes sense to you. It will, when I press play and I'm hearing a phone call at the first scene, I'll go, oh, I get why this is an audio series. I won't be like, why is this audio? I'll know. And that's very helpful. Another thing to dive into is something I really like to drive home. I mentioned aliens earlier. I think a lot of impulse when getting into this is, oh, I'm going to make a big sci-fi space epic journey, which would cost, $300 million if we made it in a film, but I can make it for cheap in audio. I just want to encourage you to think in the opposite direction. Of course, you can make your big sci-fi audio series, but audio is an intimate medium. It works best when it's small. So you can, of course, you can do your big space sci-fi show, but like you need scenes that are small. Because if you think about podcasts that are successful, like any kind of podcast, like what are the most successful podcasts? If you look at the charts, they're mostly just one or two people talking. And so that's what works. That is what works in the medium, just people talking. I always say, never underestimate the power of two people talking. It is so interesting. We sort of think we need all these sound effects and all this craziness going on, but the podcast that people listen to every day, they listen to an hour-long episode. It's usually just one or two people talking and talking about a thing because we find that interesting. So trust that. Something else that really works is when you're alone with a character. I mean, we heard Bennett, his sighs and his groaning it expresses so much to us. We all spend time alone, and I'm not at home talking to myself, saying how I'm feeling. But like, if you just had a microphone on me, I'm gonna be like, ugh, or as I'm typing on my computer, I'm gonna make sounds. So think about that, and it communicates my emotional state to people. And breathing sounds are such a great way to communicate that. I always say there's a huge difference between inhaling with your mouth open and inhaling with your mouth closed. Like an opened mouth inhale is a gasp. You go, that says something. And closed mouth inhale is something very different. That sort of the gasp is surprise. The closed mouth inhale is like bracing yourself for something, and that's a very different action for the character to do. A trick that I found is at the end of the day when you're recording, when you're done with your actors, before you release them, do what's called an emotion bank. I always say, which just use like 5 or 10 minutes of their time and have them do what I just did. Have them do small, medium, and long of everything, like a quick gasp, a long one, have them do sorts of laughter, have them sigh, have them clear their throat. All these little like small mouth sounds that we make throughout the day, have a bank of those. Because what they do is if a scene feels flat, or if the performance wasn't exactly what you needed it, you can always just in audio drop in an inhale, a little breath, a little clear of the throat. And it works because the continuity is easy in audio. And so before you release your actors, always get a little sound bank of just emotions, I call it. And do it at the end of the day, because if you start with that, your actor is going to be like, what are we doing? And they will immediately lose trust in you. But it's a great fun thing to do at the end of the day when they're tired. And also if they get frustrated at you, like you'll get some good sounds. And I think talking about it being intimate, build everything around your character's experience. And that brings me to second closest thing to a rule that I have. It's another tool that I always use. And some people might be like, I can't do that when I tell you what it is. But I strive to do it in every show. And I call it a vocal anchor. And what I do is my protagonist, my main character, is in every single scene. And I know that sounds interesting, because in film we're used to like jumping from character to character and the story comes that way. But if your protagonist is in every single scene of your audio series, it allows the audience to take in less information. It really helps them understand what's going on. It's a great tool for clarity, because if let's like make up an example right now. Let's say you have like two characters in one scene. It's like, let's say it's like two women and they're running on treadmills in a gym, which is a cool audio sound. So they're having a scene where there's like two friends and they're talking. And then at the end of that scene, we cut to a man on a boat. And it might make sense in your story, but as the listener, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And it's very hard in audio to jump to the next scene like that. So what I always say is, can your character continue through? So like, let's give one of the women a name. Let's say like her name's Megan, and Megan's the main character of your story, and she's running on a treadmill with her friend. And while that scene's happening, her phone vibrates, and her dad says, "Come to the boat." This is I don't know what I'm creating right now. And she's like, "Oh, I have to go to the boat." So then the next scene is Megan arriving on a boat. We know what's going on. We know that the man is her dad. We know who she is. We understand why we're on a boat. He told her to come there. It's a simple thing, and it makes your brain, you have to do a lot of creativity to tell your story that way, but what it does for your audience in the final product is they're not spending the first 5 lines of your scene saying what's going on. They're not rewinding. They're just going, oh, Megan's on a boat with her dad, and I'm just going to take in the scene now. I'm doing a murder mystery right now, one of my shows that I'm working on, and it's been really helpful because he's in every scene. The main character, he's solving a murder. He's in every scene. So what it lets the audience do is focus on the suspects and not worry about him. Like he's the main character, so we're on his emotional journey. But each scene, everyone he interacts with, we're like, oh, let me pay attention to them. Did they do it? We can pick up clues. It's a really helpful tool to help your audience focus on the information in the scene and not waste focus on figuring out why we're on a boat and who's on the boat. Another trick is I say two voices in a scene is great. 3 voices works, but you got to be clever. And 4 voices in one scene is really hard. There are ways around this. There's no rules. Do whatever you want. But be smart about it. Dialects really help. If you can justify why a character is British, then do it. And if everyone else is American, I mean, like, I'll be very transparent. In Gay Pride and Prejudice, we had a character who vanished for 4 episodes. And one of the producers was like, are we going to remember who he is? And we made him Australian. And that's why that character is Australian. And it works in the story. You believe that these people have an Australian friend because they live in a city. And there are people from different countries and cities. And we never have to explain it. And that character vanishes for 4 episodes. And then when that Australian guy comes back, we're like, oh, him. We know him. So if you can make a dialect work in your story, I use them all the time. It's a very clever way to remember characters and have clarity when they're in a scene together. Another trick I use is, say you have 4 people in a scene, which is very hard to do. Think of a string quartet. So a string quartet, the instruments sound different. A cello sounds very different than a violin. So when you're casting, think of that scene and think of a vocal range. A deep resonant voice we're going to know who that is, as opposed to somebody with a high-pitched nasally voice. So cast that way. And then when you're editing it together, you're like, oh, I know who's talking. I know what's going on. But if people sound the same, if they have the same like range of voice, it gets tricky. And all of this is stuff to clarify what's going on. I think clarifying the POV, clarifying who's in the scenes is going to help. Structuring your episode around the POV of the main character. Another way to think about structure is your episode structure. So I borrow from podcasts. I mean, yes, you can learn a lot from TV episode structure, but think about podcasts. Like I'm talking about host shows, or like what people colloquially call chatter shows, where it's just two people talking. They have segments. They're not just talking randomly for 60 minutes. The successful shows have segments where they ask questions to every guest. They'll always have a section where, they're asking their big question, or they're doing a little fun game with their guests. And that does so much. That helps with the rhythm. We as the listener are like, oh, they're on that part of the show. I know where I am in the episode. Or like, oh, it's about to end. I can finish this before I head out. It's a comforting thing when you're the listener to establish that rhythm and to have every time you press play, that rhythm exists. So look at the episodes of your podcast that way, of your audio series that way. What I do is I always have a cold open. Usually the cold open is where the audio device comes in. And then I have the titles, like the theme music, the title of the episode, and then we get into the meat of the episode. I usually have 2 events that happen. Like my first event has a medium energy, medium stakes to it. And then the second big event is like the event of the episode. It's action packed. There's a lot going on. There might be a fight or whatever. It's the heart of the episode. And then as you're structuring your 10 episodes, your 8 episodes, however many you're doing, just force yourself to have cliffhangers. No matter what medium you're in, if it's a rom-com, if it's a murder mystery, whatever it is, think of a cliffhanger, because it really gets me to listen to the next episode. It's the best, and it's easy to do. I mean, it's really fun to do. Like when you're in the outline stage, just be like, what's the most cliffhangery thing that could happen here? Cut a scene in half. If you've written a full scene, just like end in the middle. And then we go, oh, wait, what's happening? It will get people to keep listening. And then if they keep listening, and then there's that familiar rhythm, they go, oh, I can binge this show today. That's fun. And that's what you want. Your goal is to get people to understand what's going on and listen all the way to the end of your episode, of your season, of your series, of everything. So I think, to sort of like circle around everything I've been talking about today, I first would say use these tools if they help you. This is just things that I've discovered along the way as I've been working on this. If they help you, great. If they don't, whatever. Find something else. Invent something new. Try stuff. Keep revising. Keep rewriting. Play around. Make something small. See how it works. Start over. Just play. Just discover it yourself. But the bottom line, I always say, is don't worry about making something cool. Just make something that you love. I really mean this. It's something that it's sort of been my beacon as I create through my career. Let's be honest. We all want the things we make to win awards, to have everyone love them, to become famous, whatever your goal is. Like everyone has something. We don't just do this because we're bored. Like we do this because we want to make something that people love. And that can be distracting. You can sort of say, well, things that are successful are this, so I should make something that is that. But I think it's brave and it's hard to really listen to yourself and think of the things that you love. And for me, it was a silent disco, which sounds so silly to say, but it's true. It's sort of the heart of what I loved. And you want to like close your eyes and really listen to that, really figure out what that is. Because the truth is, I know that of everything I said, I know that this is the most true thing, is if you make something that you genuinely love, that you would listen to 100 times, it will connect with other people because it's real. And I believe that. And so listen to yourself and learn how to collaborate. It's not about saying, I love it, so it's right. It's you have to be a good collaborator. You have to take notes and change things, but keep your barometer toward what you love. I also want to say too that if you're not somebody making audio series and you've been listening to this, if you're a filmmaker, you do something else, The thing about audio first applies to all mediums. What that really means is medium first. If you're a filmmaker, you should really think visually. Like that's what your medium is. It's a visual medium. So approach it the way that I approach audio series. So it's the medium is king to whatever you're working on. So you let that rule, and that is the best way to help you. If you're stuck, like just think of the medium you're in. It can guide you to the right decision. And so I just say, keep creating stuff, keep listening to other people's stuff. The audio world is small and it's new, and there's a lot of great people in it. And I'm very big on meeting those people. So if you're making something, please let me know, reach out. I always want to listen to other people's things. That's how I learn. I'm constantly listening to these. I'm constantly like trying to see what other people have figured out. Getting jealous of other people's amazing things because it's so exciting. And like I said, my show, Gay Pride and Prejudice, that you're probably tired of me talking about, is out on Spotify for free right now. So you can go listen to that if you're interested. And support the audio community. I think we're going to pivot off to some questions now, so I can hear what you all have to say. Okay, I'm going to read out the question and then I'll try my best to answer it. The first question is, how do you create a budget for an audio story? Yes, this is a big question. I think there's a few categories to think about. There's writing, there's production, and then there's post. And then there's the release. So that's really 4 steps. Writing, if you can pay your writers, if you're not the one writing it, try to pay your writers. If you're writing it yourself, hopefully I don't know if you can pay yourself or whatnot, but that is the first budget. In production, there's actors, there's space, recording, there is software that you need to record, and then there's post. So once you have there's also equipment involved. If you need to buy microphones or rent microphones or any of that. If you're doing field recording out in the world, you need a specific type of microphone. So that's your production budget. Then there's post. Are you going to ask yourself, do I want music? Am I going to use free music that I can get from a sample online? Or am I going to have somebody compose? Because that's another budget. Your sound designer, you're going to have engineers, you're going to have designers, or if you're going to do it yourself, I mean, maybe you can do it for free that way. But then the fourth part of the budget is release. How are you going to get it out there? Yes, you can put it online and let it go, and that is free, and hopefully people will find it. Festivals have submission fees. If you want to market it and you want to sort of like put it out in the world, there's that. So I think there's 4 categories. I will own that it's the hardest part of this. It's a great question. Think of those 4 categories. I will also say I let producers figure this out for me. I think that's the best thing that you can do if you're genuinely a creative. But know what they're doing and know if something is expensive. But audio, at the end of the day, you can do for pretty cheap. It doesn't have to sound, you don't need the fanciest mic. There's a lot of technology out there to make it sound good. Is it possible to scroll back to the top of Thank you. So the next question is, can you elaborate more on the serial or series concept? What if something doesn't fit neatly in a genre? Great. If it doesn't fit neatly in a genre, make it. That's so exciting. I use the serial series concept because that's mostly what I do. Mine are mostly 10 episodes. You can make something that's one freestanding 30-minute thing, one freestanding 2-hour thing. To generally answer this question, I would say, let it be what it wants to be. That's the beauty of audio. Think of how we consume it. People are going to have it on a podcast app, or they're going to, or you're going to send a file to them, or you're going to like maybe put it on YouTube with a graphic. Think of how they're going to consume it and think of the best way to get that story to them. So a lot of people consume audio on their commutes. And there's studies that show the average commute is about 20 minutes. So if your show is longer than 20 minutes, they're not going to be able to consume it on one trip. So if you're trying to get people on their commute to work, 20 minutes is a good pocket. Let how you want people to receive it influence what it is, but also let it tell you what it is. I hope that answered that. If it didn't, ask another question and I'll continue. The next one is, can the audio story be a musical? Yes, it absolutely can. This is something else. I can go on a long rant here because I think that this is really exciting. A lot of people are trying to do this. And I think if you can do it, you should absolutely do it. I would love to make a musical audio series. The thing, I come from theater and I grew up listening to cast albums. And there's some cast albums that have scenes in them from Broadway shows. And that is like, I used to love those. I would listen to the ones that were the whole show with the little book scenes in between, and you get the whole story. I've sort of said, like, I would love to make a 2-hour musical that is that. You can do an episodic musical. That genre works in audio because think of cast recordings. So I would say if you're interested in making an audio musical, find like either musical theater albums that are in the same world as you, or think of like musicians that have concept albums. Like that's something that people are still doing today, and they're really, really creative. Some of the greatest artists right now are releasing things that would be defined as a concept album, where there's sort of a story and there's like poetry in between the songs and whatnot. Look to that as a great model. And there's definitely musicals that have come out that you can find in audio stories. I don't see another question, so I'll wait and see if another one pops up. But if another one doesn't pop up, I guess we can maybe wrap up this. Great. I'm so grateful to have been here today. Thank you so much for listening. And make audio stories. We need more of them. And they take time, but they're not that hard to do, and they're fun, and you can share them. The greatest thing is that you can make something that is affordable and small, and then you can share it with people, which is so hard to do when it's film. When it's audio, you can just literally text it to people, and then they can listen. Thank you so much. See you soon.